What is the biggest I shouldn't have said that moment you've ever had right after you said it? My mum was in hospital. As it turns out, she would never leave the hospital. But at this stage she was sick, but not that sick. She had a private room with a little enclosed garden outside. She had a blue-tongued lizard who lived in the garden, and she would pass her long days watching the lizard scurry around and catch bugs and lazing in the sun. She would tell us every time we visited what the lizard had been up to, the funny things it had done, and made her smile during the day. She lit up when telling me about its adventures. One day when I came in to visit, the blue tongue was out the front of her room in the car park. It had been hit by a car and killed. I went to visit mum, and she was very sad. She hadn't seen her friend the lizard all day. I said to her, "Oh yeah, I saw him out in the car park. He won't be back. He got run over by a car." As soon as I said it, I tried to suck the words back in, but I couldn't. Her face crashed. She was crushed. I tried to say maybe it was another lizard, or that her lizard would be back, but it was no good. The damage was done. A week later she died. She had been in the hospital for 3 months, and was getting better they thought. But this day, she just died. They thought she had just given up. That was in 1996, 22 and a bit years ago. And I still wake from sleep thinking about that. I still shudder every time I recall how stupid I had been. I'm now a 50-year-old man, and I can never and will never forgive myself for that stupid statement. It still makes me cry. We had a friend of the family, my grandma's lifelong friend, who was labeled the crazy cat lady. She had several dozen cats. Most were feral and lived outside, but occasionally she'd nurse and tame sick kittens when they came around, and they'd become inside cats. Most had feline AIDS and left snotty marks on the walls from the constantly sick cats sneezing on them. The whole house reeked of ammonia from the dozen litter boxes she placed in her open garage and basement. Anyway, she was a kind lady, and after her husband passed it became my dad's personal responsibility to make sure all her heavy lifting was taken care of. So after all these years of sick cats and ignoring warnings from friends, naturally she gets bit and it gets infected. It was horrific. It just kept getting worse and worse to the point her foot had to be amputated. Cut to the point. One day my dad volunteers me to help him clean the litter and power wash her garage. I'm a dickhead teen at the time, so naturally I complain about how the smell makes me sick, and I hate cats, so why do I have to be the one to blah blah? I'm an entitled prick. So he informs me we need to help now more than ever, because the infection caused a chain reaction of health problems and she might not last much longer despite her sunny disposition to everything going on. To which I respond, so you could say she has a foot in the grave? I've never seen my dad look so disappointed. I wait tables for morning shift. There are 2 parts to the restaurant I work at, the dining room and the dessert counter for carry out. These 2 girls come in and are seated in the dining room. Instead of ordering with me, they head to the counter and order drinks. I deliver the drinks and immediately one girl comes at me so full of attitude that her order is incorrect and that our staff is rude. It's still really early in the morning and I'm in dire need of a vacation, but I bite my tongue and tell her I will fix it. I go back to my coworker that made the drinks and ask him to remake them. He's not happy about it, but remakes the drinks once we find the ticket proving he read it wrong. I go to the girls' table and tell them the drink is being remade. They are continuing to be rude and catty, to the point I'm responding with beachy politeness. After having problems communicating with them, one of the girls says to me, "I don't know what that problem is." This is where I messed up. Remember, I'm in need of a vacation. I replied, "The problem is your attitude." Inside my head I just cringed and yelled no. The girl exclaimed, "Excuse me?" I decided to just own it and go with it. I have been at my job for a while and I know I'm not about to lose it. So, I repeated what I had said to her. She and her friend got mad at me and decided to leave. Take your $12 order at 7 AM and shove it, you overly catty. See you next Tuesday. Side note, I did not get in trouble. They had been rude and disrespectful to any of the staff they encountered. Edit. Fixed my spelling error. When I was in 4th grade so I heard what I thought was an utterly hilarious joke from Air and Space. I can still remember it. It involved a pilot with a speech impediment and his reaction to the tower guys accidentally making a comment about it. I thought this was the funniest thing on earth. So at school I figured I'd tell it to the teacher I liked most, the computer teacher, who also had a speech impediment. I felt my heart fall into my shoes as he stared at me blankly and then went back to work. I knew I'd faked up bad. I also knew I had no idea how to save this situation. And he barely, if ever, talked to me again. I was at that school until 8th grade. Maybe there were situations that were more severe, or more important, or more damaging. But this is the one that's still stuck in my brain, 20 years later. Edit fine, since you guys wanna hear the joke. Remember I was like 9ish, so to me this was the funniest thing ever to idiot young me. And I had no idea that was what you'd latch onto. A bunch of pilots were training at mock sub hunting runs out in the Pacific. Each pilot had a radio operator for them, but the operators could hear each other and the pilots in the control center. At one point one of the radio operators turned to one of his friends and said, "I swear my pilot sounds just like Elmer Fudd." Because the pilot had a speech problem. It briefly goes dead silent in the room as he hadn't turned off his mic. He stares at it for a few seconds until the pilot says, quietly, "Be viewy quiet. We are hunting submarines." I had just been rejected for a date by a friend of mine that I asked out. I asked her out to dinner and she suggested that we bring a third mutual friend with us. I said I'd rather not and that this was me asking her on a date more than anything. She declined. And then I screwed up. I texted said mutual friend because I felt I could talk to her about anything, telling her that I asked the other out on a date and that she rejected me. I don't remember exactly how it went, but I think she asked me what happened and how I felt about it, and I was answering her. At some point I ended up saying I was frustrated about this and that being friends with a girl I asked out feels like being a dog with a piece of meat being teased in front of his face. The mutual friend was like, "What the fuck, why would you say something like that?" and revealed that her best friend, the girl I asked on a date, was sitting right next to her watching the conversation unfold. I will never live that down. I will always have that night in the back of my mind, torturing me. Those two were indeed the best friends I ever had, and I ruined it, and there's no turning back, or making what I said go away. If such a thing is possible, I ruined my own reputation forever. Neither of them have communicated with me at all for about 5 years now. I miss them. Late to the party, but totally worth a mention. My 8th grade science teacher suggested he bring in his cat for everyone to meet. In my eternal wisdom, I said we should kill it and eat it. I immediately knew I faked up. The whole class went dead quiet. He was former military and had no qualms with calling me out, and rightly so. He immediately said, "What in God's name is the fuck wrong with you?" or something to that effect. I almost died from embarrassment. I mustered an apology, but knew that wasn't going to be the last of it. Later that day during lunch my name was called over the intercom to come down to the principal's office. I was basically grilled by all my teachers and the principal about whether everything was okay at home, whether I often had thoughts of hurting animals or others. So I had to spend the hour convincing everyone I wasn't a homicidal maniac. Just awful. I even had a cat at home that I loved to bits too, so I have no idea where the impetus to say that even came from. She's still with us now. I'm 25 now, and I still cringe thinking about it. But I also still say stupid shit, so there's plenty of new fodder to feel embarrassed about. Never low on supply. Alright Reddit, here's my time to shine. I was waiting on this table of a sweet, older couple. I noticed earlier in the meal the man had on a hand brace thingy bob because he was missing a finger. Yep, you see where this is going, don't ya? Well, fast forward to the end of their meal. I go to check on them, offer dessert, all that jazz, and go to grab his empty plate. What I say next is what I have always said to tables to be corny, because I've heard people snap at me, so I just want to be clear, before I dump their last few crumbs in the trash, that they are done. "Can I grab this out of your way, sir?" "Absolutely, I'm stuffed," he says. Gotta ask laughs. Wouldn't wanna lose a finger. "Oh god, what have I done? It's lose a hand, you dumb," as my face probably turned beet red. The wife laughed, and the old man did not, and put his head down. I brought them their check, they tipped just fine, and left. That was 4 years ago, and it is my worst foot in mouth moment. I still wonder to this day if it was a recent injury and he was self-conscious because he didn't laugh and didn't show his hand after that. Still haunts me when I wait on amputees. I had just joined an adult club rugby team, fresh out of college. There was a woman on this team that I just thought was so cool. She was Amazonian, soft but shy, sarcastic, witty, and an amazing player. It was one of those moments where I wasn't sure if I wanted to do her or be her. Anyway, we were at a team event at a bar and I ordered wings. When they came I offered her one, but she politely declined. Oh, I'm a vegetarian. Immediately my brain went into find something witty to say mode and the first thing it comes up with, and that comes out of my mouth, is oh, so you must be a cunt huh? Where the fuck did that come from? She just looks at me and says excuse me. I knew I faked up. I knew I needed to climb back out of that hole, but no time to dig in deeper. Oh yeah, everyone I know who is a vegetarian is a huge cunt. Yeah, we never really got past that one. 6 years ago, and I think about it all the time. Now that's a nice bagaz. The only time in my life I have ever actually uttered aloud a set of words that was both sexist and could be considered demeaning to another person. Normally I'm very conscientious about what I say and who I say it to. I moved into line at the deli counter. In front of me was a woman with the most glorious once in a lifetime, to me, as I had ever seen, and the part of my brain that determines proper mouth movement just failed. So I said now that's a nice bagaz. She turned around and looked at me and probably saw the horrified look on my face and smiled. I was so taken aback, I apologized, stammered, tried to tell her I shouldn't have said it, meant a fantastic wonderful jaw-dropping as and just made a complete fool out of myself. It was right out of a comedy skit. She ended up being a great person, accepted that this was a one-time I can't believe that slipped out moment and I see her fairly often at the supermarket. We are both married so no funny business. She confided in me once that her husband doesn't like her bagaz, and she was very pleased to get the compliment, although me not looking like an obvious perv helped. It could have gone really bad though. My first job, at 14, was as a cashier for a food place at a seasonal event. I had always enjoyed the event as a goer, so I tried really hard to do my job well. My boss was a really cranky woman who hired a cook that took 20-minute smoke breaks every hour. His girlfriend, same issue, another 14-year-old, and her good friend who was consistently drunk on shift. So all of this resulted in me and the other 14-year-old picking up as much slack as we could. Not legally allowed to work the fryers, but it meant huge lines, and for drunk people waiting for fried food, that shit turns ugly fast. I like to consider myself an easygoing person, but the few times I've been pushed to my limit the witnesses have told me it was a little terrifying. So one day, overwhelmed and exhausted, I yelled to my boss for help, and she ambles out of the back and is like, if you can't do the job I'll have to find someone who can. And I rounded on her like a friggin' cobra and pretty much shouted maybe, if your drunk ass friend wasn't passed out in our goddamned freezer I would be able to do my job. In front of the entire line and the other workers. I thought she was going to punch me in the face. Legitimately thought I would get knocked on my ass wearing a stupid outfit, working for minimum wage, at my first ever job. Thankfully the event owners knew there were issues, and didn't really punish me. I was in an undergrad program that had a core group of about 12 of us who took a lot of courses together, so we got to know each other pretty well. One day after class, we all had to take the same elevator back down to the ground floor, and I had been talking with one of the other girls when we got a bit behind everyone else. Now, it was a pretty big elevator, the kind they use to move pianos I think, but when I saw them holding the door, I self-deprecatingly said oh don't bother, we are too fat to fit. Something silly I would say about myself often, except, of the 12 of us, only my friend was fat. It was one of those moments where as the words were leaving my mouth, I knew I had made a grave error, and yet I couldn't interrupt myself. Everyone heard. We got into the elevator. The silence was immediate, and lingered on as we left the building. I could feel the communal embarrassment radiating off my peers and my professor. It's been 7 years, but I still feel like a pose every time I think about it. After that event, I was so mortified. I got really weird around her in class, and we lost touch outside of the occasional social media interaction. This happened less than 8 hours ago actually. I work in the petroleum field, where I have to board different vessels for inspection at the docks. Boarded a barge earlier, and forgot my ID in the truck. After doing my inspection I went to the tugboat to sign in, and the captain was giving me attitude about not having my ID. Told him I could run up to the truck to get it right quick, and on my way out he said, "Now get the fuck out to here." Now normally I'd let something like that go, but tonight happened to be a particularly frustrating evening. So, I went back to my truck and came back to give him the ID he needed, and I was not polite about it at all. Ended up in a cussing match with the guy, and I threatened to throw him into the channel, stormed off and promptly told him to go fuck himself. Not 5 minutes later I realized I probably should have said that, and of course about 10 minutes after that I got a phone call from my boss telling me I'm banned from ever working that particular tug, maybe the entire fleet, and possibly the terminal I work at. So now I've got to be at the office at 0900 to meet with the big boss and hash this all out when I could be home drinking a whiskey and crashing out in my comfortable bed. Shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that. Edit. TLDR. Threatened a captain. Banned from tugboat. Meeting with bosses to discuss further employment. My girlfriend at the time was feeling pretty down about herself, and she was looking for some reassurance. She wailed, "I'm fat and ugly." For context, she and I were both quite large. She said she was 5 feet 7 inches and 298 pounds, and at that time I was 5 minutes and 11 seconds, and about 250. We were fat, and I still am, and that wasn't a bad thing, but it was a thing. Also for context, I'm autistic, actually, and tend to be hyperliteral. I have the social graces of a brick, and this was early in my very first relationship. I had not considered the repercussions of the huge mistake I was about to make. I reassured her, "You're not ugly." That was not the correct answer. What I should have said was, "I love you just the way you are," or something else that redirected from her insecurities toward her value and lovability. I did not do that. She quickly pointed out my mistake by becoming even more tearfully upset. Oops. This ended up lengthier than expected. Oh well. A little over 2 years ago I was meeting up at a sports bar with some friends for one of the first games of the football season. I don't really give a hoot about football, but my friends, including 2 roommates at the time, do, so I figured I'd join for the festivities/beer. About 30 minutes go by that I'm there, and my best friend in the group, we'll call him James Thames, hasn't shown yet, which is odd, because he's usually pretty timely. I text a few times, give him a call, and nothing for a while, until I get a text that says I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. I ask what's up, and get no response, so I continue with my pint when maybe 10 minutes later I get a call from his sister, another close friend we'll call Jenny, in tears asking me to come over to their mom's place. I close out my tab and head over there, no questions asked. Once I arrive, I see their stepdad sitting on the front steps looking very upset. As I walk to the door, he takes my hand very firmly and tells me Dad Thames died in a car accident earlier this evening. I can't even speak. I run upstairs to find Jenny, who is just bawling her eyes out. I stay a couple hours before leaving to go see James at his place, before sending a message out to my roommates and another couple friends in our roommates thread on Facebook Messenger saying Dad Thames died earlier tonight in a car accident, completely thoughtlessly as a heads up. As soon as I hit send I remember that James Thames is in that thread, and he is the first person to see the message. I died a little bit on the inside. I'm sure he didn't need the reminder of what had just happened, and I felt like such an asshole after that, but thankfully when I got to his place he was just happy to have support around. My ex called the cops on me when I was drinking from midnight till 7 AM. We had a non-physical argument. She just didn't like how I was laughing bullshit away. I'm gonna call the cops. Go ahead. See if I faking care. Cops show up. I'm drunk. She lets them in, and I'm like, whoa, you can't come in here, this is my faking house. She had no right to let you in. We argue back and forth. They start saying they should just arrest me. That's when I went bananas. You ever hear of the 4th and 14th Amendments? You are violating my rights just for being here. I can't leave because public intoxication and DUI, and here I'm breaking no laws. Is her face battered? Is the house in disarray? One of the cops was the shift commander, white shirt. There were 4 total. Then I say, the kids are gone to school. If anyone should leave, it should be her. She's sober and causing the faking fight. Maybe you should arrest her for false reporting of a crime, which is me enjoying some beers inside my house. The cops huddled, the white shirt directed them out, and all was well. The ex, bewildered, says you're faking nuts, you know that? I said yeah, remember that next time you want to involve Omda's holes into my house, it might not go so well. I worked in a medical clinic that had a very old roof. It had like really coarse aggregate painted with a white sealant of some kind. Needless to say it was hell on your knees if you had to go up and work on something which required kneeling or crawling for an extended amount of time. The roof had some small leaks we spotted during California's very short rainy season, and I was taking a small bucket of roofing tar up there to do some patchwork. So I grabbed these nice beefy knee pads with comfort gel inside, started them on over my work pants and headed up from the basement. While I was walking through the orthopedic depot, one of the cool nurse's assistants I was friends with asked, "Where are you going?" while looking at me knee pads. Without thinking I replied, "Heading into ours to ask for a raise." She laughed, as did the orthopedic physician who happened to be listening in. After the words left my mouth I had this feeling of chagrin. That joke could very well be taken as inappropriate, and I could have gotten in big trouble. Especially considering the employee base was 95% female. Luckily everyone that heard the joke was cool, and they chuckled realizing I was kidding. The physician was a very non-PC type doctor, and he lost his sheet. I told the ER manager later, and she laughed at my chagrin, but wasn't very concerned with my behavior, since I was model employee and definitely the most agreeable and well-liked maintenance man there. This haunts me still. This happened when I was babysitting for a family who has 2 foster children, and 2 of their own, whom I babysat before the family took in the foster kids. Prior to the foster kids, the mum was chatting with me about how she was planning on fostering blah blah blah. She mentioned she ideally would like to foster a child of around the age of 5 as they are "less damaged." She ended up fostering 2 children of the ages 14 and 15. Fast forward to about 2 weeks ago. She had just come home, so I went to put my shoes on by the door, where she normally sees me out. All kids were in the front room, which is near the front door. We stand at the door chatting where I mention that my boyfriend's mum is considering fostering a child. The mum says "Do I can help her out with references and whatnot." We was talking more about it when I finally say "Yeah, you've got to be a really special kind of person to look after damaged goods." I thought I was complimenting her on how kind and selfless she is for fostering, but she hushes me quickly and points to the front room where the foster kids are. I really hope they didn't hear me say that or were listening on our conversation. This keeps me up at night, but I do think highly of the kids. They're amazing considering what they've been through. So, my good friend from university, who I have known this many 20+ years. She was in my very small class of 30 graduating students, and was always there smiling and laughing right along with me, while some of the others were either too uptight or unfriendly. We kept in contact as friends, marriages, kids, and all that other stuff, and as creatures of habit, my greeting to her has always been, "Hey, Em. How's life with you today?" 20 years of that on the phone, in library, in class, at a party, going out for dinner, and bumping into her in the parking lot. Well, her mother died a few years back, and I went to the funeral service. It was sad, because her mom was pretty cool, and I could tell that is where she got her own character. It was a small gathering, and I had heard from friends about how her mother met her demise, cancer. I see her in the front greeting people paying their respects, and guess what I said to her without thinking? "Hey, Em. How's life with you today?" Yep. I realized it only after I had said it. Her sister is standing right next to her. Her cousin, who I don't know, is right there close by, and FML. Her reply was, seriously Riff? Kind of screwing up her face and squinting her eyes. She shook her head, chuckled, and gave me a hug. I whispered, oops, I'm sorry. Force of habit. And she hugged me tighter and longer. I used to work at the breast cancer center of a well-known hospital. We had just one break room throughout the whole entire building for some reason, unless you wanted to take a 10-minute walk to the cafeteria, which was in a completely other building. Anyway, so one day I walk into the break room, go find tons of pizza, salad, soda and the usual event stuff. I was having a great day, so I stroll in and start helping myself. I look around to see a large group of women talking with one another, but I didn't look at their faces. So I'm sitting there eating a slice, and one of these women come up to me and say, sorry, you can have that slice, but you can't take any more, they are for these women. I figured okay, fair enough, so I yelled out loud, but it's a party. She looked at me very stern and said, this is not a party. I just looked at her and went, geez, this looks like party if I've ever seen one. It was at that time I looked around and my face went pale. All of the women have been crying and hugging each other. It was a breast cancer support group. I looked back at the lady I was talking to and she was giving me this death look. Just booked it out of there and avoided break room for like a month. There were signs right outside the door that I didn't even read. I still feel like shit about it. I know this is going to get buried since I'm late to this, but I have to share this story. About 8 years ago I took a month-long sabbatical from work, and in that time I got engaged. When I got back I was catching up with some of my office mates and telling them the news, when I remember one of them was also recently engaged. I asked her when her wedding was, and she got real quiet before saying that there wasn't going to be one. I asked to make sure that I wasn't mistaken, and she had been engaged. She said she had, but her fiance had dumped her and broken the engagement. At that point I had already dug myself pretty deep by letting my mouth run ahead of me. But when she said that for some reason in front of all our office mates, I just blurted out, ah, okay. That makes sense, because I could have sworn last time I saw you someone still loved you. Her face immediately crumpled into full-on bawling, while my coworkers rightfully glared daggers at me. I didn't really know what to do with myself, so I just took a sip of my water cup and then quietly walked away, which probably looked even more callous. Back in high school senior year I was chatting up this one girl. Right after our fall exams, some students were sticking around. Exams ended at like 1. So me and her are talking, and she's pretty sassy, which works for me, because I have a tendency to be extremely sassy as well. We went to a Catholic high school, so we had to take exams in religion. Ironically, this made me less religious. So we are talking, and the subject of religion gets brought up. She Jewish, I'm Catholic, technically. Anyway, I remember she said something like Catholics are such idiots something Jesus. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I remember that I thought cheating on her people would be valid banter. It was not. I cringe when I remember saying Hitler should have finished you off. I thought it would be funny given the context, but there's never a right context for that. I remember the look of shock and anger on her face when I said that. I tried to backpedal, but she just walked away. We never spoke again. Some friends/strangers came up to me asking about what I said. Once I gave them my story, they would either back me up or just laugh and say an idiot. So, yeah, I could have gone worse, but I still think it could have gone better. I'm not proud. I was a teenager. A military douchebag latched onto our group one night. We were living in China, and so our mutual friend's poor English ability gave him a poor filter for terrible individuals. We eventually guessed. But anyway, the key factors are that he had a necklace with the word will emblazoned on it around his neck, and that he was a huge butthead. After initially saying hi, after bumping into our mutual friend, he latched onto us as a whole. He proceeded throughout that night to tell us why the US was justified to exist, because the European invaders civilized the native population, while exterminating those uncivilized portions of the native population. Needless to say, we didn't really take to him very fast. But towards the end of the night, when people had started to turn on him, and jokes were being made at his expense, and I was trying to make peace against several of these jokes being aimed at him, I said to him, well, maybe it would be best not to have another dude's name around your neck, seems kinda romantic. He turned to me and said, you better be faking joke, that's my dead best friend. I in my panic assumed he was trying to fuck me and so dug myself further. Well, he's probably sat up in heaven thinking back bit gay, mate. Dude almost beat the shit out of me and I retreated beyond red in the face, and I learned since that I was way out line. But he did ditch us when a friend of all of us passed out, calling us despicable, forcing us to carry her 2 blocks OMS plus LEGS to the closest apartment to get her somewhere to sleep. Wished he'd have lended us some military muscle to carrying dead weight, so his friend could be SFE, rather than just using it to harass and intimidate us, but I personally probably deserved it. This incident goes down as the year I ruined Christmas. Also as the moment I was banned from drinking Fireball for life. It was Christmas Eve and the entire family, except my nephew who was on his first of several stays in the local penitentiary, was there cooking, eating and generally making merry. The mother of my niece brought jello shots. This is not a regular item on the holiday menu, but hey, why not? I take one, then another, perhaps even a third. They were good. They were also made with Fireball, which I was unaware of, and would have declined had I known. Fireball and I do not get along. The phone rings, and it's the jailbird. Everyone takes their turn talking to him, and without warning the phone is thrust into my hands. Say hi to your nephew. Without thinking, I shout into the phone, hey Tony, have you been butt-foozed yet? The kitchen and surrounding rooms go dead silent. His dad, my brother, rips the phone from my hand and runs off to another room. I look up from the shrimp I was preparing and see my entire family staring at me in shock. Nobody says anything. I went back to cleaning the shrimp and I can hear the whispers starting all around me. Christmas was definitely different that year as everyone eyed Aunt Debbie with suspicion and perhaps even a little fear. I never got an answer to my question either. Yikes, this is a bad one. So we were all in the age range of 17 to 20. There was 12 of us in an IQ room for a friend who was shot in the head by his girlfriend. She was acquitted in criminal trial. He's on a ventilator and close to brain dead. Very sad. Anyways, he's been on the ventilator now for about 4 months and we are visiting him for his birthday. We've all been there at least 20 times, so this is nothing new. As you can guess, emotions aren't as strong, and we all make small talk very often. I can't remember how the topic came up, but ironically completely unrelated to our friend, we were talking about firearms. I expressed interest in owning a firearm and the group consensus was that no one wanted to own one. One of my friends asks, why are you so adamant about owning a gun? My response, are you kidding me? So that if some crazy person breaks into my house I can shoot them in the head, whoops, shit. I was on acid in my friend's house listening to music. It was just coming on, and we smoked a fat joint making the acid jump gears. It felt good, but I was a little nervous, because I couldn't really control my thoughts. My friend lives in a big house with a lot of others, and his mom's friend's nephew comes home at like 1 to 2 AM, right when the acid's peaking. Someone rattles a door lock. I get really paranoid that the cops are coming, or his mom's home or some nonsense, but this guy walks in and asks us what we are doing. My friend says we dropped acid. This guy recommended we listen to Pink Floyd. A great idea, I thought. But no one else seemed to like the music besides me. It gets a little awkward cause I could tell no one else really liked it. Can't blame them for liking rap. Right before he turns to leave he cocks his head to the left, and he has a giant faking nose. I've seen some big noses, but this guy had the fattest Roman nose that stuck out. I know the acid probably affected what I was focusing on, but I looked at it. Then I looked at my friends. Their eyes were all fixed on his nose and I looked back at his nose. He looked a little self-conscious. I feel bad thinking about all the teasing I may have reminded him of. Looked at him square in the face, and in the most cocky, smarmy, asshole-like tone imaginable. I said, nice nose. He looked at me, and his face turned red. He said, what? I felt as though I could see the hot blood rushing through his face. His eyes seemed to change, and his teeth got sharper, like spikes somehow. In my mind for a second I realized my error. I try to apologize and offer an explanation. For some reason a phrase from a documentary came to mind. I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to say that. I'm on acid and the human eye is drawn to protruding objects while thinking that. All I could say is protruding objects. He looked like he wanted to hit me, which I understand. Years ago, I was playing Black Ops 1 with a friend. We weren't super close, but we talked frequently and knew a decent amount about each other. The year prior, his mother had passed away suddenly and it hit him hard. He had been on a massive year-long bender of alcohol and any drug he could get his hands on. It was really sad to watch, but he had slowly began to come out of it and slow down on his usage. One of my weird humor quirks is that I'll take something someone says and repeat it back to them in the form my/you/your insert person here does that. It's genuinely not even funny most of the time, but it makes me and the people who know me laugh because it's more weird than anything else. An example, a classmate says to me, I really faked up on that exam. I'll give it back to them as your brother really faked up on that exam. I've done it for so long, I do it without even thinking most of the time. On this fateful day, we were just playing the game, hanging out, and joking around. We were having a bad match, and he yells out, "Fuck, I died again." Me, being the complete dumb as that I am, without even thinking, says, "Your mom died again." I heard my own voice trail off as I said it. I had shocked myself. My mouth was open, and I couldn't get out more words. I felt like the biggest piece of shit in the world and I wanted nothing more than to melt into a puddle on the ground. After about 5 seconds of silence that felt like an infinite amount of eternities, he let out the most half-hearted "heh." I apologized profusely, and he knew that I just said shit like that all the time, because he knew me. He was ultimately fine, but the friendship just naturally split over time. I still think about that every so often, and want to self-assassinate. So, I was on a second date with this amazing girl and things were going great. We went and got burritos at a cool burrito place and just talked. Soon, she started to open up about her past relationships and how they were pretty awful. She'd been sexually harassed and verbally abused, and while it was a lot to take in, especially for a second date, I appreciated how open she was. I let her know then and there that I would always treat her with respect and ask for consent, and that I'd never do any of the things that they did to her. That made her smile. "Wanna go smoke?" she asked. I smiled back and said sure. Then we left the cool burrito place and got high off a few blunts together in my car. I hadn't smoked for a while, but she was a bona fide stoner, so I was way more out of it than she was, but we were still having a good time. Now it was getting late, so I decided to take her back to her place. I turned on my car radio as we started driving. The radio station was supposed to be chill oldies, not straight up reggae, so I was a bit surprised when Bob Marley's Three Little Birds started playing. I looked over to my date and probably had the dumbest grin on my face. Right at the apex of the song, we finally made it back to her place. I put the car in park and kept the radio going. Then I reached for the reclining buttons on the side of my seat, and as I began to recline, I slowly and innocently said, "Man, isn't this just the type of song that makes you want a recliner and relax?" Obviously I was still high out of my mind, but the moment I looked over at her face, I sobered up real quick. With one of the scariest death stares I've ever seen, she said, "Oh haha, I see what you're trying to get me to do. You want a blue job, is that it?" Oh seat, no. Long story short, she got out of the car and there was no third date. I was in my chemical class a couple weeks ago when the professor, very chill, might be a little loose up there though, made an analogy using cows. Now I'm from the city, whereas almost all the other students are used to Mountain Dew and farm animals. Ohio. Keep this in mind. She basically said, "Okay, so you know how you drive by in the morning and see cows on the left, and by the time you drive back at night they've switched to the right." So in my head I thought she was talking about some natural phenomenon like how male birds are bright to attract mates, or how birds fly south in the winter. So my brain thought the best way to express this thought was, wait, cows move. All 160 people there thought it was hilarious, and so I of course made it worse trying to explain myself. The girl next to me who I'm sort of friends with shook her head and told me I should probably stop because I was just making it worse. Also, the same professor probably thinks I do bath salts and don't know what essential oils are, but that was a whole other fuck up. In my defense, this is a 5 o'clock to 6:20 p.m. class with my earliest being at 9 a.m. My grandparents had made their basement into a little apartment for my mom and I to live in. She was a teenager when she had me, and when my mom met my stepdad when I was 5, we moved out. Over the years, my grandparents rented the apartment out to family or friends. Fast forward to about 12 years ago, when I was in my early 20s. My grandmother, who I was very close to, was sick with ALS, and I decided to move back into my childhood apartment to be close to her. My cousin had been living in the apt previously and had painted the bathroom a burnt orange color to match the hideous bathroom curtain, or vice versa. Due to my grandmother's illness, she hadn't been able to get down into the apartment for a while, so when I was moving and she asked me how it looked down there, I told her it was fine, but that Carly, my cousin slash her granddaughter, had painted the bathroom an ugly color and there was this awful curtain in there, and described it to her. To which my grandmother responds, "To the best of her ability, I made that curtain." I about died. I felt like such an absolute jerk. She died not long afterwards. I kept that curtain folded in a drawer for years and years and just very recently brought myself to throw it out. I could cry thinking about it. Damn it. I'm crying. The curtain really was ugly though. Edit. Autocorrect. I used to work in a shitty place about 8 odd years back, and I had a manager who was shitty and all, although he was nice to me before he became my debt manager. He's dating my housemate at the time, so he stays over at our place a lot and used to be friendly with me at home, but at work he was like a shitty lion. Then something bad happened at work which made him hospitalized. Well, there was a robbery and his body was grazed by a bullet, which was a horrible thing because another colleague was killed because of the robbers. Anyways, my colleague and I raised our hands and whooped when we realized he wasn't going to be coming to work and yell at us because he's been giving us shit for a while now. Obviously I was not thinking of him being sick, I was just thinking of being free of his dictatorship. Unfortunately, that action was seen wrongly by another manager, who told his girlfriend, who became super angry at me and complained to my sister, who told my mom, and my mom was so disappointed in me, saying that she didn't raise me to be like this. I realized then how it might have seemed to them. I'm not insensitive, I was just cheering for having a peace of mind at work, not because a dude was injured. I had to talk to the girl and apologize and explain that the reason I cheered was because he wasn't coming to work, not because of his injury. She accepted it, but I know she doesn't like me much since that day. Well, her boyfriend was an ass. TLDR, my friend's girl got sexy for a night out, and when she asked how she looked, I panicked and said she looked weird. Story time. In college, one of my roommates was my best friend's girl. She and her friend had a room at bailout, and rent was cheap, so they offered me a spot. Some of my friends were going out for drinks and invited her along. She didn't usually join, but this time she did and wanted to look good for the occasion. Me and the guys were waiting in the living room, and when she came out, she looked fantastic. I never really thought of her as attractive cause she was my dude's lady, but I was reminded she was quite pretty. In a hoe, she looked at us and asked how she looked, and I panicked and said, "Wow, you look weird." "Yeah, no," like an idiot would say. Well, she was obviously a little hurt by my word, vomit, and went back to her room out of embarrassment. When she came back out, I apologized as sincerely as I could, and she seemingly brushed it off after that. We all went out that night and had a good time, but anytime someone mentions word vomiting, I remember that night and cringe a little. I was waiting in line at my favorite nightclub with a friend. A bit drunk already. We were looking at the smokers area nearby, which had a bunch of people sitting around looking a bit bedraggled and tired, being the late hour it was. I think the local meme page of the day often joked about how trashy it usually looked and the type of characters lurking there. It even had a nickname of refugee camp, possibly because when it was wet and cold everyone would huddle under an overhanging awning. Now a small piece of background info. In this town there was at the time quite an influx of refugees from places like South Sudan, because there was some kind of immigration center and extra government housing assistance there. Anyway, I said to my friend quite loudly, "They're right, the smokers area does look like a refugee camp." I heard a girl's voice near me. "Sorry, it looks like what?" I turned my head slowly to see a girl with an extremely dark complexion giving me an "oh no you didn't look." I could have just said "oh nothing" and shut up, but do you think I did? Me, well, that's what they call it who calls it that? Me, stammering about some meme page on Facebook. I had to attend a safeguarding and protecting children course as mandatory CPD. I'm a sports coach so have to have checks etc. It's basically a group lecture that is utterly ridiculous and completely blurs the line between common sense and best practice. Anyway, we get to the exercise, where the lady reads a scenario, and we rank it from 1 to 10 in terms of risk, 1 being no risk at all, and 10 being risky. The first scenario was, an adult female rugby coach leads a session alone for the senior men's team. General mutter that it's not risky at all. My colleague, who I don't like much, and is not the best practitioner, pops out with, "Wait a minute, that's not that good, I think we should discuss this." The lady leading the session says, "Great, some disagreement. This is where we will get into the meat of the discussion and discover things. Now, what's the worst eventuality in this scenario?" Without missing a beat I smash out, "Gang rape." I knew immediately I should have done what I normally do, and just say it in my head. My boss is staring at me in disbelief. There's a huge intake of breath across the room and silence. The lady stammers. I decide to explain myself. "Well, if they murder her, she's dead. If they gang rape her, she's gotta live with that." Still more silence. I took a moment to remind everyone that we thought it's a perfectly reasonable scenario as more adults are normal human beings, and it was the fuckwit next to me whose dirty imagination had thought anything bad might happen in said scenario. I'm going to continue only saying my horrible jokes in my head from now on. This is basically my life in essence, which is why I have self-diagnosed very mild selective mutism. I have a knack of saying the wrong things at the wrong time. One of our friends, I'll call him Bob, was basically Quagmire from Family Guy, a perv who'd find a tree attractive if he stared at it long enough. So one of our other friends, I'll call him Steve, jokingly asked, "I wonder if he'd wanna fuck Jim, our other friend's younger sister." The joke was that Bob's younger brother was the same age as Jim's younger sister. I retorted, "No way man. Bob told me once that he thinks Jim's younger sister is ugly as fuck." And guess who I said that in front of? Jim. Luckily, everyone zoned me out and were on their phones. Another incident. Our friend Alex had recently came out, and I was a typical stupid 14-year-old who thought homophobic jokes were cool. One time, we were in the car listening to my favorite artist. One of our other friends teases me by saying, "God, this guy sucks. His music is horrible." I smirked and said to him, "Anyone who doesn't like his music is gay." And yes, Alex was in the passenger seat when I said that. But just like the above incident, everyone zoned me out, ignored me as they were on their phones. One last incident. Right after my friend told me that his friend tried touching his girlfriend by saying that his hands were dirty and he wants to wipe them on her shirt, I said to him, "What the fuck? Hell no. Do it back to his girl. See how he likes it. The fuck, I just won't do the ellipsis suspense thing anymore." Yes, I said that in front of his girlfriend, who immediately, and obviously extremely reasonably, advised him not to do that, to which he, again very reasonably, agreed to. They were both chill enough to not bash on me for proposing such a stupid idea. Yep. My life is one big pot of cringy moments caused by me saying wrong things at the wrong time. My ex and her mom didn't have a great relationship. Her mom often accused her of being too loose with men, and that she would end up pregnant etc, and her mom in general said some pretty horrible things about her daughter. During my relationship with her, there had been several times she would cry about it. Towards the end of the relationship, I got a vibe that she was seeing other guys, or at least was a little too friendly with them for my taste. We broke up, but tried the friend thing for a little bit. Didn't work out. She slept with one of the guys I had found her too friendly with, and I was a bit annoyed by the whole situation and said something about it like, "Oh, I thought you were just friends during a call." It struck a nerve and an argument followed that ended with her saying that it's all in my head and that I'm the only one who thinks she's a slut. I said, "Well, not just me. Your mom thinks so too." It went quiet on the other side of the phone, and a few seconds after she hung up, we have never spoken again. The last thing I ever said to this girl was that her mother didn't like her. I regretted it instantly. Even if she had cheated on me, I still don't think she deserved me saying that. I wrote her an email the following day apologizing, and that I didn't expect a reply or anything, just that I wanted her to know I was sorry for what I had said. A few years later she ran into some of my friends at a party and slept with one of them. The others said they felt it was a revenge kind of thing. I'm not sure. I really hope not. If anything, it makes me feel even worse that one sentence hurt her so much that she still cared years later. She was a great girl. 19-year-old me was just dumb for saying shit like that. Outside of that, I once said to a friend that I hoped he would die of cancer, and I assured him that I was fully aware that his dad had died of cancer only a few years before, which had left a pretty big hole in their entire family. Both these two situations weigh on my mind still a little, especially the one with my friend. It was a fucking horrible thing to say, which I've never apologized for, but I really would like to. Maybe someday. We haven't been in contact for like 8 years. I was at the car wash with my buddy a few years ago. While waiting for the car to be finished up, we decided to have a cigarette. I don't smoke anymore, but when I did I was very polite. I would hide it in my hand from passing school buses, walk across the street from people, things like that. Especially sensitive to babies and pregnant women, of course. So two women come out visibly pregnant. They sit down in those plastic chairs and were also waiting for their cars to be finished. I promptly tap my buddy to get up and we start to walk away. I can tell the gesture is appreciated, and I felt good that she realized what I did. The fuck up. I walk back after a few minutes post cigarette and one woman left. The other one smiled at me and I smiled back. In my mind I thought that was a thank you smile, not just a regular smile. I'm an outgoing person, so I decide to pipe up and reap some more real life karma acknowledgement. I start to say, "We moved over there, since the both of you." That's when I first realized my grave mistake. In a split second I saw her eyes start to widen. I knew at that point she was indeed not pregnant, she was just fat. Fuck. Here I'm trying to be nice to people, and I still just called a fat girl pregnant when she wasn't pregnant. There have been suicides for less. What a tremendous asshole. So this all happened in microseconds. I can feel my buddy realize what happened, and his shock and dismay at my words as well. Literally microseconds I finish the sentence and say, "We moved over there, since the both of you have such nice pocketbooks," with a smile, but the damage was already done. She didn't buy it. I try to play it off smooth and make an emergency exit to leave the car wash and this faking planet if possible. Out of the corner of my eye, while starting to walk away, I see her pick up her pocketbook and cover up her big belly. TLDR, tried to be nice, was not nice. I'm truly sorry, car wash girl. Back in high school, my English teacher had one of those student teachers trying to do training in class with us. The normal teacher likes it because he would just leave the class and let the assistant teacher take over for unspecified lengths of time. This happened pretty regularly, which is how my slip up happened. The assistant teacher started a game with everyone where he would put up a word on the board and groups of students had to think of unique synonyms for the word and he would decide who wins. Totally subjective. One of the words he writes up as annoying. To which I immediately blurt out our regular teacher's name thinking it would be hilarious. And it was. Until I realized a second later he was actually sitting at his desk not more than 10 feet away from me. His response was, "You know I'm right here," with such a sad and lonely tone that I felt nothing but extremely apologetic. I had no words to say other than "I'm sorry, I was just messing around," and then continued to sit in my seat in silence and shame. I realized that calling your teacher annoying isn't necessarily a big deal. but it was the way he responded and sounded that really got me and made me completely regret what I said. Went to a mutual friend's house with a good buddy of mine. We are sitting there with 6 of us that know each other and one guy that rents out the basement. He's such a nice quiet guy. My buddy starts giving me shit about my choice of music. One of my other friends says back quote, "What band are you talking about and why?" To which I reply with the exact words he told me earlier. Back quote, "That Norah Jones sheet is for women to cry to as they're cutting their wrists in the bathtub." The guy I didn't know looked down, sniffled a little, and got up and left. I knew as soon as the word back quote bathtub came out of my mouth that I shouldn't have said that from how his eyes immediately went blank. We carried on for the rest of the dinner, but M never came back. On the drive back, one of my friends told me that his wife had killed herself a few months ago. That's why he moved in, so that he could get away from the house where she killed herself. In the bathtub. I'm not sure if she liked or was listening to Norah Jones, but either way it was enough for me. I still feel absolutely terrible. I was visiting the family of my then girlfriend a few years back. Her mother and grandmother, pretty hardcore Catholics. They barely tolerated the fact we lived together unmarried, but they were actually very accepting of me, and I often politely went out of my way to accommodate them where I could. It may not have been my preferred way to do things, but it's a small effort that seldom goes unappreciated. To my partner, however, they were often pretty harsh. She gave back as good as she got, but they also often expected more from her than they should, and wouldn't hold back making snide comments about her lifestyle. The last day we were there, we were all a bit worn out from a long week, and they were picking on her to pack faster. I could see an argument approaching, and her grandmother said something along the lines of, "Why can't you be organized like Behenort?" Before thinking, I snapped, "Don't use me as a weapon to humiliate her in front of everyone. That, my friends, is how you end up feeling sick in a house with 3 generations of crying women." My 3 younger brothers are fostered to be adopted when they come of age. They have never ever been anything but my brothers to me since they were born. I've never treated them different, as they have always been here. I truly love them all very very much, more than they know. The oldest was going through a really faking annoying phase when he was a young adolescent. I think about this time, it was years ago. Completely changed his attitude towards us. Rude as fuck to my mother, causing arguments and drama every single day, and causing upset to my mother, which in turn really pissed me off. One day he was being extra as whole why, and generally being a dick. He said something to upset me. So me, also being a dick, I was 18ish and not fully cooked myself, said, "Yeah, well, at least I know who my father is." I mean, the moment I said it, I burst into tears and ran to my mother to tell her what a disgusting thing I just said. I bawled my eyes out and apologized over and over to him. He forgave me. My other brother called me a faking bitch. I was. My ex-boss was talking to one of the owners of our company. This was a fairly huge corporation. This man was honestly inspirational. He was super nice, and so was my boss. When he phoned you, you could hear his smile. All part of the point, trust me. Owner, we'll call Ron. Boss, we'll call Brent. Ron was from a war-torn country. I was always too embarrassed to ask where, because as a child his home was blown up, and he is now an amputee. He lost his right arm all the way up past his elbow, and his right leg below the knee. I'm getting to the point, trust me. Brent had a meeting with Ron concerning Ron's retirement. To celebrate, his kids had bought him a really fancy watch. They walk out of their meeting and to my desk to give me the dates and times for their next meeting, and Brent tells me, "Look how fancy Ron looks with his new watch." I compliment said watch and I go, "Wow Ron, this is what you get for investing in expensive education." Rich kids, it was common for us all to joke around. We were all friendly. Ron goes, "Thanks, I'm sure it cost an arm and a leg," and I laughed. To my horror, neither one of them was laughing. I still think about it to this day. One of the grocery stores in California does this thing every year where you collect stamps based on how much spent, and at the end of the even you can turn in your stamps for pots and pans. I was buying groceries after work one night and the guy at the register asked if I wanted my stamps. My response was, "Yeah, sure." The woman behind me, who was pretty good looking, asked if she could have them. The following line of logic went off in my head. Pots and pans make food. Dinner is a food. These pots and pans can be used to make dinner. She eats dinner and I eat dinner. If we eat dinner together it'll be a date. Date equals sex. We haven't had that in a long time. Did you follow that? Okay, good. Here's what came out of my mouth. If you make me dinner in these pots and pans you can have them. Even the woman ringing up groceries in the next lane leaned over to ask me what I said. It was awkward. Later on, I told a buddy this story. He had a good laugh and said it's a shame you didn't invite her over to vacuum your house too. I'm late, but I once uncontrollably cursed over 20 times in front of a Christian audience. Despite being the most awkward individual you could meet, I played the leading role in a dramatic love tragedy. One of the last performances took place in a very intimate weird theater that I was very uncomfortable with. The people on the front row were sitting at the same level, just half a meter from the end of the stage, where I had to be a lot, dramatically monologuing. It is good to know that I was allowed to freestyle a little bit, because it suited my dramatic role, since I'm flamboyant and loud. The girl I was performing with was nice, but a bit hot. She did not really get people, and was as a result a little difficult to work with. We had just finished the first part of the play and there was a little break. I was really glad we were halfway done and had distanced myself a little, but from the rest, to recover from the awkward setting. This girl went off at me for having said a curse word that was derived from the name Jesus. I said something like OG in Dutch, and that I was disrespectful, and that I should not curse. And I said sure and apologized, but she said I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation, and started ranting about how I had personally offended everyone. The entire dressing room went silent, and I went beet red. After she was done we directly had to go on stage. I focused so hard on not cursing that I cursed without a break. My monologue was a disaster. I blurted out Jesus Christ, holy shit and holy Jesus, and even some variations of God damn it, and every time I said it, the girl, who had to embrace me a lot, pinched me and stared at me intensely, which made me more nervous. Every single time the word Jesus escaped my mouth I went through all of the circles of Dance Inferno in my mind. Instead of kissing her at the end, I asked if I could tightly embrace her, because I could not look at her face. Good times. A few years back this gal I knew had a huge crush on me. We worked at a kid's summer camp teaching swim lessons. She would always talk with me in a somewhat flirtatious manner, playfully tackle me in the pool. One day we were walking together after a day of work, where she more or less told me she really liked me, but she said it a different way so to speak. People have been making rumors about us you know. Me, what kind of rumors? That we like each other. Me, well, just rumors I guess. Yeah I guess so. I could tell right then and there that she was crushed by my comment. In hindsight I could have said something else like, but they don't have to be rumors, but that never happened. We still talked while we worked together, but it was quite obvious that I done goofed. Man, I guess it is true. Guys never do know when they are being hit on. A rough childhood, some issues with depression, and being a correctional officer for 4 years, I developed a really delayed emotional response to things as a way of coping. I'm the guy who, when my girlfriend told me about an acquaintance who popped a lot of pills who died from nodding on Xanax, told her that was really stressful, and asked her where I could get some Xanax. At a medium security unit I worked at, we had this stolen valor guy named Yeoman. Well, Yeoman never showed up for work, because he was always too tired from dealing with drill practice, or with exercises, or whatever in his reserve unit. But the thing was, nobody even knew what branch of the service he was in, because it changed for everyone. He told Marines that he was in the Marines. He told Navy that he was Navy. I saw through his bullshit pretty early, and two of the things I hate most in this world are dirty cops and derelict soldiers, but stolen valor is probably in the number 3 spot. Anyway, we were at shift turnout, and you know shit's weird, because the warden was there. She starts telling us how earlier that day Yeoman was found dead, having killed himself. When all of the robots started parroting he had his problems, but he was a good guy. Has anyone contacted his unit? Blah blah blah. Someone said he was a Marine. Like they were proud of him or something, and someone else said he'd told them he was Navy. It was amusing to watch the life fall to pieces as everyone finally figured out that not even his fiancée knew what he was supposed to be. They passed out shift paperwork after telling us that counseling was available and all that, and in that paperwork I got a move slip for a rather annoying offender that I was tired of dealing with, and another one right behind that, and I said hell yes. Finally getting rid of offender and offender, and the guy next to me, a bit of a friend of Yeoman, said, rather broken up, yeah, it's like faking Christmas, isn't it? Normally I don't care at all about what I say. I stand by it. But I'd entirely compartmentalized the announcement to the point I didn't even remember it was something we'd been told. It's one of the few things I regret saying, just because of the people who I hurt with it. Now, later that night, when asked to go to dinner with the other co's, I told them I wasn't going to go to dinner to talk about Yeoman. I didn't like him, and that doesn't change, just because he is dead now. They said it was not about that, it was just to hang out. I gave another co a ride to the diner, and when the subject of Yeoman came up I delivered line of my all-time hits, this isn't anything new. Yeoman never showed up for work anyway. As far as I'm concerned, this is just him no call no showing to the rest of his life. This was said among people who have the same necessary warped sense of humor I have, and it actually got a lot of laughs. I might catch some heat for what seems like some pretty heartless reactions, but you've absolutely got to be able to put off those emotions until later in my line of work. You have to be able to suspend the 5 steps of grief and deal with them when you're on your own or in a safe place. Anyone who has worked high stress or dangerous jobs can tell you that, but I understand that it can look utterly horrible to the average person. I'm a person that doesn't regret much, but I regret that time not giving other people the time they needed to push the off switch before getting back to business. Being with the new girlfriend, let's call her Gwendolyn Pepper, who has the same first name as previous one. Let's call her Gwendolyn Bishop, for a rocky year. GP was somewhat not confident enough, kept comparing herself to GB. Wasn't really helping, because I was still in love with X, while being happy with new girlfriend. We were play fighting / foreplaying rough, and I said, you know what, it won't go down that way, Gwendolyn Bishop. The room was filled with the loudest silence I'd ever heard. Oh, and the time we were driving around, and I told new GP that she was becoming more and more the love of my life. She didn't understood it the way I meant it. I got the hint when she started screaming. Had to explain was with X. Thought she was the one. Painted a life together. She wasn't the one. Threw the canvas away. Now starting to paint a new one with her. Not a cool car ride. TLDR. Make sure all the girls you date don't have the same first name. I was dating this girl in high school. To preface, here we have lots of people who loiter in parking lots with the pretense that they provide security, which you have to pay for with a buck or two when you get to your car. I don't like these people much. Back to the girl. One day I was visiting her at her parents' house, and somehow the subject of those car guards came up when we were all having lunch together. Being the little asshole I was, I went on a 5-minute rant about how car guards are just beggars and don't really do any real work. The room went silent. Her dad said I was a car guard for about 8 months during a time when we struggled financially, and it really helped us pull through a tough time. It was at this time I thought I shouldn't have said that. I thanked them for lunch, apologized for what I said, and just stood up and left the house to go home. My god, the shame I felt. There were multiple times in high school where a teacher would say something, and I'd instantly have a sarcastic remark. I wasn't a bad kid. In fact, I was quite the opposite. But sometimes, my mouth speaks faster than I can think. Wow, that's a really bad idea to say out loud. Let's not. Anyway, there were multiple times I had to play stupid to get out of things. One time I had study hall with a teacher. This guy was fairly new, so I'd never had a class with him. He was pretty okay from what I could tell. I remember one day he was talking to another student, and he said it was really disrespectful to him when students knew teachers by their first name. So immediately I blurted out. Luckily, I didn't get in trouble, but I did debate skipping study hall for the rest of the year. I don't even know why I said it. My thought process was something along the lines of /oh please dude, it's just a name. None of the other teachers give a shit. Wait. Maybe he has a really embarrassing first name. What is it? Oh, Trevor. Which I easily cold played off by the way. But I just sat there silently. A couple of African American coworkers were discussing the Titanic and how neither of them would have even been on a dumb as big boat in the first place when one of them said, you know, they probably didn't even let any black people on the boat anyway, and my dumb white ass, who up until this point was not in the conversation at all, decided it would be a good idea to explain that they in fact would have had black people on the boat. Well, they must have had cooks. It was supposed to come out as even if they wouldn't allow black passengers, they'd likely allow them behind the scenes as workers, but my mouth works faster than my brain. For those curious, there were 2 black passengers who died. Joseph Laroche, 26, a Haitian-born French-educated engineer who was moving back to Haiti because he could not find work in his profession, and Victor Giglio, the son of an Italian father and Egyptian mother, and personal secretary to US industrialist Benjamin Guggenheim. They allegedly died sipping brandy like gentlemen, and likely would have been denied a boat if they attempted to board one. My brothers don't tell me things. We were driving back home after an AC/DC concert and stopped by one of their friends' houses on the way back. We get there, and the only person in there is this nice woman, pretty enough, but in hindsight definitely looked really tired. We are invited in, and the house to look pretty normal, a little bare, but still furnished. So we are there for maybe a half hour. Everyone's just chatting, the woman is accommodating, and nothing has gone wrong just yet. Then a man starts climbing the stairs, and he spots all of these strangers in his living room, and I can see just faint traces of distress in his tired eyes. He asks the woman, who are these people, worried, and me, being the joker that I am, open up my mouth for the first time that night and say, don't worry, we are just here to rob you. All at once people start yelling at me, my brothers are hitting me, telling me to shut up, and I can see panic consume the man's face. The woman immediately starts telling him it was just a joke, which it was, and that there's nothing to worry about. Eventually the guy goes right back downstairs, and my brothers start chastising me for saying that. I mean, yeah, it wasn't the best joke, but was it really necessary to hit me like that? Turns out it was. See, what my brothers neglected to tell me was that we were in a goddamn crack house, and that some of the residents were probably super high at the time. I don't know what they were thinking, bringing their 16-year-old brother into a crack house, but yeah, suffice it to say I kept my mouth shut for the rest of the night. It's probably too late, but I'm gonna share this anyway because it's amazing. I work part in a convenience store that's like if Whole Foods was a convenience store. There was a major music festival happening in the park 4 blocks from my store when this happened. Let me preface the story by telling you all this. It's been an issue in our stores, having cashiers accept bloody money, like money with blood on it. Mostly from the homeless around here, but it's been enough of an issue that there had to be an announcement made saying, hey, no more money with blood on it. Anyway, it's the last day of the music festival, and our store is swamped. I'm running the register, just mindlessly scanning items and giving change. A girl comes up, I scan her item, and she goes to hand me her money. It was in the tiny little lighter pocket of her shorts, all wadded up. She jokingly said, sorry, this is probably the worst money you'll get all day. Will you still accept it? Me being on autopilot replied, as long as there's not blood on it I'll take it. I go to give her change back, and notice what it was she was buying. Tampons. Goddamn tampons. I stammered for a secretary, then just shook my head and gave up. She had no way of knowing that was an actual issue in our store, and now there's some chick out there who thinks I'm a misogynist piece of shit. At boarding school, during evening studies, asked once to the guy watching us, is it true that other female watcher gets rammed by college students? Like, we were 16, I wanted to make my friends laugh. Said female that watched us was kinda hot, and there was this stupid teen rumor that she was banging with the dudes on the other side of our building, who were first year college students. Not in the U.S, I'm translating. The guy watching us was very cool, and kind of a big bro to us. So he gave me a chance and replied, what? Sorry, I didn't hear. I repeated the question in the now perfectly silent room with all my friends watching me like, is he really saying that? He's nuts. Was already in a bit of trouble before that. It raised a massive shitstorm for me. Ended up bargaining to be put in detention every Wednesday afternoon for 4 hours instead of being expelled. I had like 5 months left of school. It sucked because at boarding school, the only free moment of the week was the Wednesday afternoon. I was pretty stupid that time and I kinda knew I shouldn't repeat the words, but I did anyway, because le funny teenager. Back in high school, when I was a freshman I was friends with a bunch of juniors/seniors, because of my sister. We went to a nice school, but with the poor income students. Basically a redneck school, where people kind of have money, but still act trashy, and don't take care of themselves. Anyways, my sister drove me to school, since she went there too. We had a BMW 500 series, so we were known across the school. It was annoying, and we got called rich all the time. Even though I expressed it was our dad's car, we were just middle class. That isn't relevant to the story though. This girl we associated with drove into the back of a bus and it basically decapitated her head to where she had major brain damage, and died just hours later. On the way home from school the next day once we all found out what happened I said to my sister, I have no sympathy for people who text and drive. You have to be brainless to do something like that. There was an awkward pause and we looked at each other, and I realized well dang, we busted out with laughter, even though it's so evil to say something like that. We still reminisce on that conversation to this day. One of the worst things I unintentionally said. Stupid me back when I was in grade 11. It was during lunch I think, and 2 of my friends and I left school to go to the community center next door. At one point in the CC I was making jokes, which I always do. Still is a very regular thing for me. Turned to one of my friends, a brown guy, and made this joke using the N-word. There was absolutely no negative intentions behind the word being used, but my own mistake was saying it much louder than I did. 5 minutes later a gentleman came up to us. He was a black guy who looked pretty ripped. He asked us who said the word and why. We were honest and genuine, telling him there were no bad intentions. We are good people and we'll never say it again. He gave us the green light and we left from the CC. Only to find out the following summer that the gentleman who approached us with his missiles was not going to do anything bad. It was said he was the nicest guy in the world. In the moment I could have sworn that was it for me, but since then I don't say words that shouldn't be said. Learned my lesson from that day on. I was in high school AP US history class and our teacher was a real character. He was the fun teacher in the school and would always make jokes in class, especially with the wacky nature of the US history. One lesson, we are talking about the issue of sexual assault in the 21st century and how it was handled from the perspective of the church, society, and government. A very somber and serious topic for a high school history class, for sure. Our teacher uses his own personal story to help explain the point. It turns out his brother was sexually abused by their father-in-law when they were growing up, and it left him psychologically scarred for most of his adult life. Our teacher finishes telling us this story and the room is heavy. No one is saying anything or knows really how to react. Trying to lighten the mood, I said the first joke that came to my high school mind. Well, you can't spell rape without app. Luckily the teacher died laughing and didn't do anything about it, but as soon as the words left my mouth I thought I was heading towards a suspension. Still mortified to this day. This happened about 10 years ago and still makes me cringe whenever I think about it. My boyfriend at the time had his 100-year-old grandma visiting. She was spry, but still 100 years old. At the time, I had just gotten my license, so it was on my mind constantly. Let me set the scene. Boyfriend's entire family visiting to see grandma. Their house is full. Everyone sings happy birthday and we have cake. Of course though, I had to introduce myself at some point, so why not? While everyone was in a good mood, I walk up to grandma, sit next to her, and try to introduce myself amidst all the chaos. She couldn't hear me, so my teenage self said fuck it, and stopped attempting to get her to hear me. Later in the evening things calmed down, and the house was nearly silent and my boyfriend makes a joke about how slowly I drive. I do. I drive like a grandma, and I literally pointed at his grandma while saying it. My mind must have made a connection. I really don't know. No need to introduce myself now. I was dying inside. Why? Why did I do this? What was to be gained? The entire house got silent, and to this day a little piece of me dies whenever I think about this. A friend's mom passed away in 7th grade. Really tough time for anyone, never mind losing your mother. This was also a lot of our first brushes with helping a grieving friend. We were all walking on eggshells. We are sitting in wood shop, finishing up some project, and my friend whose mom passed makes an obvious adolescent joke and says, "Pass me that screwdriver. I need to screw this wood." Another friend, without thinking, says, "Your mom needs to screw this wood." Again, a super typical joke for our age and time. But the whole room goes silent and just stares at my friend. He takes a deep breath, chuckles a bit, and says, "I knew it would happen eventually. That was a good one, man." For about 3 seconds it was total, "Why the fuck would you say that?" But then 12-year-old friend had probably the most mature reaction you could. It lifted this blanket we'd all been working under, to walk on eggshells, and reminded us that our friend was still the same kid he was. I don't remember a lot of things vividly from my childhood, but I will always remember learning that laughter, familiarity, and just being normal old friends with somebody can help mend a hole in their heart. Once when I was a kid I confided in my future mother-in-law that my dad had cheated on my mom while I was a kid. He had died less than a year before, and my mom was literally falling apart. I basically lost both my parents, and one night I screamed just that at my mother, one particularly abusive night. I did regret that. Anyway, I was 17, newly orphaned, watching some talk TV show about spouses and infidelity. I said one of the women on the show was disgusting the way she talked about bringing her big husband to his knees to cry when she told him she had been screwing some dude behind a baseball park for months. I don't know how it came up, but she said something very cruel about my dad and my dad cheating on my mom. I turned to her and said, "What do you think your husband is doing when he is traveling around the country every week?" She didn't say anything, but I know her face well now, and that hurt her. I don't even remember what she said. That hurt so much. I just remember how angry I was and how I felt so bad about it afterwards. If she ever remembered it, I would say sorry, but she will never ever apologize to me for any of the messed up shit she has said. Then again, even when I cared for her dying husband in the hospital in the last month of his life, and even though he said I was a good one and nobody give me any shit when he was gone, she still doesn't love me. I miss reading to him, but I don't miss him being scared. That last month was torture. He lost everything, and he simply gave up. I hope you are happy for smoking cigs his whole life when she hated it. I hope you are happy what you've done to your family for these cigarettes. You did this to us. I told you so. She said some seriously ugly things to him while he was in that hospital bed dying. I'm sure she said nice things too. I know she was grieving and angry and so many other things, but I honestly feel like she crushed his spirit, and I think he was just tired and gave up. Ugh, everyone I know is so faked up. My first job out of college, I worked for a company of about 40 people. 20 of them were young Americans, and the other 20 were all Syrian immigrants with the same last name, because our CEO was nepotistic as hell. He was a super corrupt guy. For instance, he was an atheist, but he bragged about declaring half of his enormous mansion to be Muslim shrine, so he could slash his taxes, chuckling as he explained that the eyes was too cowardly to investigate religious claims of anyone besides Christians and Jews. He also explicitly told me to screw over some of our business partners by violating contracts. He paid his wife about $50K to design our business cards because she was an artist, etc. His family members were untouchable, and all of them outranked the non-family and liked to give them orders. So I reported to about 20 bosses, all of whom liked making a junior web developer bring them coffee. Anyway, one day he gave a speech about how we need to practice good citizenship, and I blurted out, "At least you should, if you're a citizen." The room went silent and everybody stared at me a while. Eventually he ignored me and resumed his speech, but later I got a stern talking to. I work a truck stop, and a few weeks ago, some of our local customers came charging up to the desk. A trans woman was in the woman's restroom and they were claiming that she was standing up, peeing where everyone could see. That was impossible, because there are only closed door stalls in the women's restroom and the gap is quite low to the floor. They would have to be stooping and being super intrusive to tell how someone was standing or sitting in a stall. I wasn't about to ruffle any feathers cause I'm pretty sure law in my state is on the side of the trans woman. I just told them I'd look into it, I didn't, and got back to work. Then two of the trans women came to my counter and, not trying to be mean or rude, just giving the state of the situation, they were quite clockable. But they were also 10 times more polite than the screeching rednecks from before, so I didn't say anything. I almost think they knew someone was complaining. So we got to talking about coffee, because we had new equipment in the store. We are switching over from traditional coffee pots to a single cup system. They were saying how they liked it and I agreed. It had new blend I liked better. One asked how popular it was, and I admitted it could be better. These old truck drivers are set in their ways. They keep wanting the old pots to be refilled, even when I try to direct them to the new stuff. It has not been a smooth transition. The second I said it, I snapped my mouth shut. Did I just faking say that after everything that just happened? You idiot. The one lady still talking with me saw the look on my face and just laughed it off. Polite goodbye and everything. Was interviewing for a marketing internship in a 5-star hotel. There were a lot of applicants and the management didn't have enough time to interview everyone individually, so they were interviewing us by batches of 5. Anyway, I got in with someone from my uni I know and 3 strangers. When it came to my turn, the interviewer asks me why I deserve the internship, and I answer, after about 10 seconds I'll be the best goddamn intern you ever had, and I said it sort of like I was asking a question, and had no conviction at all. The 4 other applicants in the room turned their heads towards me when I said that, and the interviewer chuckled and asked me whether I was nervous. Thankfully I had a pretty impressive resume, so I still got the call back. Unfortunately they wanted the internship to last far longer than expected, so I had to turn it down because of other commitments. Still, I was pretty embarrassed when I said that, and I made the girl from school promise that she won't tell us all about what I did. Still have nightmares about that time. As a professional now and someone with job experience in hours interviewing people, I use that moment to teach myself to envision and prepare for scenarios that can happen, whether it may be an interview, a meeting, or even a date. Trained myself in situational conversations, so that kind of thing can't happen to me again. So far I've done a good job. Last year one of my classes, being a teacher for game design, had to form teams of 5 so that they could get started with working on their game project. It was about creating a game design document collaboratively and also about getting to know their classmates a little better. One of the new engineering students came to me right after I explained the assignment. He asked, "Are we also allowed to work by ourselves without actually being part of a team?" I responded, "No. It's a team effort. You get to know your classmates and also learn how to work together." After that he repeatedly told me, "But I don't want to. I can do a way better job whenever I work solo." Eventually he said, "I don't want to join anyone. All of them suck." That comment baffled me. Since he has already started being annoying a while ago, I wanted to teach him a lesson by going up to one of his classmates. So I walk over to one of his female classmates while the rest of the class is busy finding teams and ask her, "Do you suck?" The second after that question it hit me. What the heck did I just ask her? I just wanted to make a point, but screwed it up so badly. Being aware of the sentence that had just left my mouth I improvised a bit. Luckily she responded with, "Sorry, come again. Couldn't hear you, it's too loud." I replied with something like, "No problem. AHM, do you suck at your job of being a 2D artist?" She said, "No, I hope not." I turned around and told him, "See, she doesn't suck. Now, go and find a team and be quick, otherwise you have to deal with teammates no one wants." I'm still not really over it. I so regret this and think about it quite a bit. It's been 10 years. It turned a classmate who I got along with Sue against me, and her group of friends too. Rightfully so. It was dumb. I don't know why I did it. We were student teachers, a cohort of about 20, all doing a practicum at various middle schools. It's very stressful, but for some it was more stressful than others. She had one of the more stressful ones, because her sponsored teacher or mentor was batshit crazy and going through some kind of breakdown or something. I can't remember details and wasn't witness to the crazy, but it was crazy as in she was carted off in an ambulance mentally breaking down crazy. Lots of passive aggressive stuff too. Anyways, after listening to my classmate let loose her problems and venting out some of her stress on me, I didn't respond well. I should have comforted her, reminded her it would be over soon, maybe just sighed and show her I sympathize. Nope, I say something to the effect of isn't it funny how most of us got paired with somebody like us? Even with the disclaimer first, that she's an exception, it would have still been dumb. Fuck, I regret that. Okay, a little bit of backstory. In middle school I had a class full of assholes. Imagine you took all your high school bullies and put them into one class. I really hated these people and most of them weren't very smart either. Worst thing of all, due to management issues in our school we had to stay together from 5th to 9th grade, which is very unusual here in Germany. One of my classmates tried to commit suicide. 3 dropped out. Once in math the teacher drew a dot on a coordinate system, drew lines from the axes, and asked us why these had to be in a 90-degree angle. After 2 wrong answers the teacher picked me. I stepped towards the board and started to explain that the axes are in a 90-degree angle. Our lines are defined to be parallel and therefore also need to be in a 90-degree angle. I stopped midway, turned around and you could read in their faces they understood nothing. I then proceeded to say God, you only have to look into these stupid faces. Next thought sheet did I just say that out loud? It was very early, I don't really know anymore if it had any consequences but it certainly didn't help my outsider's position. I'm going to start off by saying that I'm a guy and that I tend to not have a sarcasm filter when something happens that annoys me. My college roommates and I had moved into a dingy basement apartment with old as 70s era appliances and the same carpet that had been in the apartment when it flooded due to a water main break in the unoccupied apartment next to us, for which we would also be charged our entire deposit plus 100 or so for water damage when we moved out. Another story entirely. A few months later, after the junkie upstairs moved away with my only faking copy of The Big Lebowski, a new girl moved in. Her being within range of reasonably cute, my roommate decided to be the welcoming committee and dragged me along. I had been involved in a series of really shitty dates with crazy women and wasn't in the mood to deal with anyone. We get up there and her apartment is faking pristine. The final insult is the brand goddamn new appliances. At this point, we had been screwed hard by the apartment management on a number of things. This is the final straw on my filter's proverbial back, so cue me. Damn, whose dick do I have to suck to get these faking appliances? Yes, her mouth dropped open in an impressive amount of speed. My roommate, who would have to be played by Craig Robinson in a movie about this time, doesn't bat an eye and simply says I'm sorry about my roommate, he's crazy. I was, of course, then shoved out the door rudely by a roommate who was watching his attempt to cheat where he lived slip away, and it did. I saved you from having an ex upstairs, man. I eventually, after a few months of her avoiding me like a normal person avoids the clap, got to apologize. She laughed. I laughed. Her frat boy boyfriend gave me a threatening look. I kept laughing. It was a good time. As an aside, if they ever have someone play me in this movie, it's going to have to be Seth Rogen. The girl in this scene would have been Jillian Bell. I don't even like my life and think this would be a funny faking movie. Not my proudest moment and definitely a reactionary question I asked while overhearing a conversation. In my freshman year of high school I was sitting with a group of guys at lunch. I was working on some homework or something, so I wasn't exactly paying attention to their conversation. They were talking about sex or their dicks, or whatever when one of them, who was on the heavier side, mentioned something about his dick at which point something clicked in my head like that's not right, and I said wait, you can see your dick. I immediately realized what I had said and started to apologize profusely, but the damage had been done. I'm also really good at accidentally dredging up painful memories or moments for PPL, such as first time I met a friend, really hit it off all day, had lots of fun, no parental supervision all day, so I was curious. I say to her, so where's your mom? She says out volunteering with whoever row. Okay, and where's your dad? He died 3 weeks ago. Close friend of mine's sister was diagnosed with cancer. We fell out of touch for about 3 years. When we pick back up I ask, how's your sister feeling? I hope things are getting better for her, she died 3 months ago. Same friend's son has terrible alopecia and we were joking around, and he said something smart to me, so I pulled off his beanie to hit him with it. Kid had like 3 tufts of hair left on his head. I felt so terrible, but he waved it off. Now I just avoid small talk, or general human interaction. So quick background. TLDR, you have a particle accelerator, where most people have a tact filter. Friend, when PS2 first came out I had one. After a few weeks it stopped working correctly, sitting there pissed off, because it was my day off. I just wanted to play some games, so I was fiddling with it. Girlfriend comes over, and was chatting it up for a bit with me, and a few people that were there. She keeps asking me questions, but I have the PS2 taken apart, and I'm diligently looking for some dumbass ribbon that should fix the issue, not really listening to what she is talking about. Apparently the question was important, and she says you don't pay enough attention to me. Frustrated and thoroughly ticked off at this point I respond with, well maybe, if you dressed up like a PlayStation 2 I would. I knew I faked up. My roommate and a friend were there at the time, both just sitting there, jaws on floor, eyes looking at me with that holy shit you didn't look. Needless to say that relationship self-terminated. I was at the point where I had drank too much. I wasn't falling over drunk, but my brain wasn't double checking the shit that came out of my mouth. My brother told me that a mutual acquaintance of ours had ended up on the sex offender list. Not a surprise, the guy was a creeper, so we had a laugh over that. That guy was also a mutual acquaintance of an ex-girlfriend of mine, and I told my brother I was going to tell her about this turn of events. I knew I shouldn't have said that, and I said it anyway. My current girlfriend was sitting right there, and she was under the impression that I had no contact with any ex. We had not discussed it, and I had never told her I was no contact. I'm not sure why, but my girlfriend was really threatened by that particular ex. She was completely fine with an ex that I was still friends with. Anyway, later that night, again, drank too much. I texted the ex to tell her about our creeper friend, and I got busted doing that. It led to a huge fight. I was a server at a well-known chain restaurant. I always made sure I had the customer's bill printed out and ready after I delivered their entrees, so I could drop it anytime they needed. I was usually pretty good about gauging whether or not I could joke with my customers based on my interactions with them and their general demeanor, but I was particularly busy that night, so I was focused on just doing my job. This table, 2 older couples, maybe mid to late 50s, had just finished their entrees, so I asked, as I always do, if they were interested in dessert, specifically naming a couple of desserts like a good employee. They, as they often do, said they were full and ready for the check. Without thinking, I literally tossed the book containing their bill onto the middle of the table and said, well then here is your dessert, beaches, and then proceeded to shoot the finger guns at them. It was pretty clear by my tone of voice when I said it that I was joking around, but in that moment, I was instantly paralyzed in fear. I just stood there, eyes wide, finger guns still out of their holsters in silence, while all 4 of them just stared at me. What felt like an eternity was probably only a couple of seconds. Finally the silence was broken by chuckling, as one of the gentlemen at the table pulled cash out of his wallet and reached for the book. I felt a huge amount of relief, smiled, told them to have a wonderful evening, and scurried away. Oh geez, mine is rough. I was in jail and had been for a solid 8 or 9 months at the time, and there was a woman in my module who everyone knew had HIV and everyone knew how she got it. Someone told her it was a clean needle and purposefully infected her. She will be yes. So I'm sitting and talking with my Muslim friend and we get to talking about ADHD and how it affects people and how meth affects people with ADHD. So as I'm explaining that it would have similar effects as Adderall or something like that, I turn to S, well known for not being able to focus on one topic for too long. Me, S, do you have ADHD? She thinks about it for a second. S, I don't know, I've wondered but never gotten it checked. Me, so, how does meth affect you? S, well, when I smoke it, I get super relaxed and just sighs, but when I shoot it, me, you get HIV. There was a solid 2 seconds before either of us realized what I had said, and she started laughing. To this day I have no idea what possessed me to say that. Mine was actually right before I said it. A handful of years ago I was hanging out over at a buddy's house. It was 3 of us who'd been friends for a decade or so, and each of our girlfriends. I had music on my phone playing on shuffle, and one of Bo Burnham's songs, Sat, came on. My one buddy's girlfriend, who I'd met my fair share of times, but had never really gotten to know very well, exclaimed how she loved Bo Burnham, and we started talking more about him. One of the lines in the song he had changed between the first live performances and the actual production version, which was playing, so I figured that would be a nice fact to add to the conversation. The line had been changed from a joke about miscarriages to a joke about animals or something. I was explaining how he had changed the line and started to tell the old version, when about halfway through the line leading into the miscarriage remark, one remembered that my buddy he told me about a year prior that she had gotten pregnant and had a miscarriage. My mind immediately started racing at a mile a minute to try to come up with a new way to end this verse, but I guess clever song lines aren't something that can just be pulled out of your ass within seconds every time. Looking back, I would have just been better off stopping dead and acting like I forgot the punk line, but looking like an idiot never crossed my mind at the time as a method of preventing myself from looking like an asshole. So alas, I finished the joke, ended the conversation, and her and I never really did speak again before they eventually broke up. Amongst people I know, the term speshi refers to a bicycle made by the Specialized brand. It is commonly known as a slur for mentally disabled people. Long story short, I'm walking through the city and I've noticed a lot of these bikes. I decide to let my friend know this. Bro, you seeing all these faking speshis? He just stares at me in a way that instantly lets me know I've faked up. Turn around. We were at a crossing to see a school of Down syndrome children standing right behind us. Bonus, one of my friends, same one in story above actually, is on a bus with me, and he sees this guy stumbling about, like really struggling to walk. Rash, that guy's faked. Look, he can barely walk. I look down and instantly recognize the man had some disability, as one of my childhood friends had the same. Made it worse that the bus was pretty busy and a lot of other people looked down at him too. I'm an exchange student at the moment. We had a camp when we arrived in the country where we stayed for a weekend. We stayed in rooms together of 4 people, so 2 bunk beds for each room. On Saturday at around 11 I was just chilling in the main building when the leaders told us to go to our cabins and go to bed, so I headed back towards my cabin. When I walk in, there's 5 persons in the other room in the cabin, one of them my roommate, and the door to my room is closed, but I don't think much about it. I then proceed to open the door, only to find my other roommate having sex with one of the girls. I was just not expecting this, and didn't know what to say, but I was thinking about the leaders telling us to go to bed, so I just blurt out, guys, it's time to go to bed, and walk out again, turning around to see all 5 guys from the room staring at me, and I just give them a tired look. Looking back on it now, I just think about how it must have looked like I knew they were in there, but interrupted them to say bedtime. I cringe every time I think about it. Edit. One of my friends from the other room is staying in the same town as me, so we later discussed this, and he said that he wasn't sure what my roommate was doing in there, but as soon as I turned around and looked at him with the expression I had, he knew what was going on. Had a friend in college that was in my department and shared most of my classes with me. We got along fantastically, worked really well together, and made a really good team for most things we did. I haven't had too many relationships with women that were exceptionally and successfully platonic, but this one was, at least from my perspective. We were setting up for an event on another campus. As usual, the two of us were running a booth, but this school wanted their students to be very involved with setup and everything else. The guy assigned to us was as dense and inspired as a brick. He kept asking me, over and over again, what he was supposed to be doing. 7 times he asked me who he should be talking to about our signage. That's Stana's apostrophe department, was my answer every time. He would then ask for clarification as to who she was. Girl with the long brown hair, girl in the pink pants, girl with the dark rimmed glasses. Never got through to him. Finally I got fed up and just yelled, the girl with the tigs the size of volleyballs. How are you missing this? The whole room went quiet, and she was standing maybe 6 feet from me. Idiot assistant says, ooh, dude, you hitting that? And tried to fist bump me. She had tears in her eyes. We got through that event, but at some point she said she didn't expect to add me to the list of men who couldn't see past her bra. She never really talked to me again. Still wish I could take that back. Only a couple of weeks ago, I was volunteering at a large Star Trek convention, and on this day I was organizing the queues for one of the photo booths. For this convention, as well as the standard entry tickets, there was the ability to purchase a ticket that allows you to queue jump, and I'd gotten used to a few of the holders of these tickets coming in late to the photoshoot. A few of these ticket holders were in motorized wheelchairs, having mobility problems that would prevent them certainly from managing the event like the majority of people, most likely beyond that too. We were at the very end of a photoshoot with Jason Isaacs from the latest Netflix Star Trek show, as well as being Lucius Malfoy, which confused me to begin with. I didn't know this until later, and wondered which part he played, as there were a decent number of folk dressed in Slytherin colors, but I digress. One of the other photoshoots must have been running late, as I got a bit of a rush of the queue jump pass holders right at the very end, as Jason had to return to his table. I was being asked if he was still there, and had gotten used to responding with yes, if you run. Probably shouldn't have used that phrase, as it had settled into my brain when one of the gentlemen in the motorized scooters asked me, and I essentially told him he'd only get a photo if he ran. Not my finest hour. Felt terrible for ages, until he stopped by later, and had a laugh about it. The relief was palpable. Nurse manager called me in to talk about what I was doing on night shift. I had been cutting up our printer paper and making 3D snowflakes for patients around Christmas time. I would hang them in their room while they slept. There were a few beaches on day shift that loved to start drama and reported me for introducing fire hazards into patient rooms. Our entire floor had a large amount of animosity toward this manager. She was an imbecile. We would be capped out at 6 patients and she would illegally give us 7th and 8 patients while she sat in her office. I avoided this person at all costs because I couldn't stand her being in charge of me and being so clueless. I worked 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. She scheduled our meeting at 1 p.m. and wouldn't change the time. She opened up with something like, "Let's talk about what you've been doing on night shift," and I immediately said, "Let's talk about what you've been doing on day shift." "What do you mean?" Then I laid into her, told her that everyone hated being under her, and she didn't even help us at all. Everyone kissed her ass to her face, and talked shit behind her back. She didn't know, and started tearing up. Our meeting was basically an hour of me venting how much our entire floor hated her, and then I told her I had to go to sleep for my shift that started in 4 hours and left. Driving home I was like, holy shit, I better put in some applications at surrounding hospitals. Felt like shit for a few days while I waited for the wrath of God. Found out she took a promotion and was leaving our floor. The floor bought me pizza and life was good. I've lost contact with that part of the family, and I still feel terrible about it, even though many years passed. I'm an idiot, and should have never said it. Anyway, you guys want to know what kind of idiocy I came with, so here comes. My second cousin, once removed, had a very rare type of cancer. It was such a rare disease that her doctors tried to send her to the USA to be studied. She didn't go, staying here instead, and got excellent treatment and got cured. A few years later, I get in touch with this distant branch of my family after moving to the city where they live. The girl is still pretty depressed, and we become good buddies pretty fast, and we're in really good terms. Now here's a thing about my stupid self. For some reason, I just love dark humor. Cartman is a port to me, and we can all see that I'm about to say something really stupid. My cousin was so well after several years without symptoms, and since I've only met her after her disease, I've never once seen her in her bad state. We went out with our sos, had a great evening, having gone out to eat and feeling happy. We were all on my car going back home talking about the future, and someone asks me about where I wanna be in 10 years. At this moment, I'm inspired by Cartman and say, nah, I don't worry so far into the future. I'm just like a cancer patient. I won't be around here this long anyway. Lost the girl, the friend, and the contact with that whole side of the family after this. I still beat myself over this quite often. I was backpacking and about to enter a wilderness area that required permits to camp. There were very few permitted camping spots in the area I was planning to camp, and I had extra spots on my permit that I wasn't going to use. About mid-morning I came across a woman camping by herself near the trail. As is typical conversation between hikers, I asked where she was headed. She said she didn't have permits to camp and therefore needed to hike the entire way through the designated wilderness area without stopping. In my mind I was thinking I have available spots that I could offer to share with her, unless she was with a hiking group that was larger than the number of available spots on my permit. With this in mind I asked, "Are you hiking alone?" As soon as those words left my mouth, I knew it would be taken the wrong way. I could see alarms going off in her head as she squirmed and stuttered to come up with a response. Contrary to everything she had just told me, she said she was waiting for a group of friends who would be arriving shortly. I couldn't think of any way to backtrack what I had just said, so I just wished her well and walked on. As I thought about it, I wished I would have retracted those words before she could respond. I think I could have talked my way out of it then. Knowing how vulnerable women hiking alone must feel, I thought about that the rest of the day and felt bad for how I had come across.